Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the Valiant live stream. George, hello.
Morning, Megan.
Matt, hello. You guys
Good
look
morning.
fresh,
Oh, we are.
ready to dive into our topic today.
Yep.
Before we go, I want to just, as always, thank you to our regular viewers for being here. We couldn't do this without you. And a little bit about Valiant. We are a managed IT service provider. We are based in New York City, but we do have a national reach. And if you want to learn more about us, please watch our past episodes. We have a lot at this point. Matt, how many are we up to?
I did an official count yesterday, and it's a lot.
It's a lot. So I'm just saying, if you between like binge watching your last sitcom or us, I'd say us. I think the dynamics are more interesting.
I mean, today is the 86th time we're doing this, and we've got another 100 and some odd pieces of content on YouTube. So I mean, like, you could either binge watch Perfect Strangers, or you could watch our content. And I'm going to tell you, Balky's going to teach you some life lessons. And he's not going to hit the cybersecurity and compliance and all the other important things that are critical to today and not 1988.
It's also very fun to see how much better our lighting gets. It's actually a big dramatic arc.
It's slowly improving. I think we have some new stuff coming down the pike. I think that will be really exciting when it comes. But we're not there yet. No. Don't show them. Only show them. Show them the small preview.
Oh, wow. Big things in the works.
Yes.
And just really quick before we move on, everyone, please feel free to join our conversation. Comment on our YouTube videos. Please, we love answering questions. We love interacting with you guys. And LinkedIn. All right. So let's dive into the stream. Today we're talking about technology and the environment, which I think is a super pertinent subject to dive into.
Yep.
If you were here last week, we focused on healthy computing environments, items to take into consideration for server rooms for optimal performance and service of your IT infrastructure, which is our bread and butter. That's really what we know. But we are going to widen our scope this week to the global level, and we're going to talk about the impact of technology on our environment and just the steps we can take to minimize our footprint as small to medium-sized businesses. Right. So I think it's very clear that technology has revolutionized our daily lives, particularly in the past 3 decades. There's been a huge advancement in our technology. Information is a few clicks away, and so our family and friends, we can connect with people from afar. This whole remote work sort of revolution that happened over COVID was possible because of a lot of the advances we made. And I mean, Matt, like you kind of said this in the doc, but thinking about just the technology we use so simply to produce this stream from all of our different homes and do it live for people, we take it for granted, but that is a huge advancement as well. So
absolutely. I mean, look, even I took that shot over to the other side of my living room with all the fancy equipment and the green screens and stuff. It looks like I'm going to do I feel like I'm going to do a commercial for like a local car, like auto use sales place.
I've seen sets way less equipped than that.
Yeah, you're more of a crazy Eddie type, Matt. I'm just going to say your deals are insane. But yes, I mean, I think we don't take...
It's simple stuff. Like what I was going to say was, we take that shot. There's a green screen. There's the LED lights. There's the tripod. There's a bunch of other stuff back here that's going to be used for producing some new videos. And it's like a $200 purchase on Amazon.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not that different from going on and getting yourself a new pair of pants and a hat or something at this point. It's not equipment that's considered to be specialized because there's this new consumer market for it. And I think that even just thinking of it in those terms and saying, you know what, the same thing goes with everything else on my desk right now and everything I have that has power running through it. None of this stuff is specialized for an industry anymore. I mean, there's obviously industry specialized equipment, but then there's all this stuff that's available to consumers, and that's because the advancements in technology and production, the ability to make things smaller, and it's great that things become more accessible, but that leads to a lot of problems as well.
Exactly. Yeah. I think we talk about all these advancements, how it makes our life easier. That's the obvious thing, but there is also equally a negative impact on the environment. How do we get all these things? I know I take it for granted, but George, we were even talking before the stream. I feel like you have a lot of thoughts about the negative stuff. And I want to start with that just so we can be upfront with everybody and then maybe move on to how we can fix it. But
Well, I mean, the first thing that always strikes me and just being is the amount of energy that we utilize in a given space, right? Like how much energy we use to power all these devices, how much energy we use to cool data centers and server rooms,
right?
How much energy we use to mine bitcoins. We're concentrating the energy into these certain zones, but the amount of energy requirement is astounding. I remember when I first started working in technology, the amount of energy density in a given data center was, I don't know numbers off my head, but it was like a third or half of what each cabinet takes now. So, when they build data centers now, they do these what they call like high density environments, and they're like each cabinet was like a small data center in and of itself in the past because of the number of GPUs, the amount of processors, the RAM. It just everything's using more and more. And some of the numbers is, and I think the other way to think of it is not only do we have the side of the cloud or the infrastructure to power the cloud, which we're going to get to in another episode. I'm really excited about that one because that's a little bit of behind the wizard's curtain on that. Really what it is that, if you think about the sheer number of devices, right? In 2000, the estimated number is 414 million users of the internet in 2000. And by 2016, that's not a long time. 16 years is not a huge time in like human time scale. It's 3.4 billion, an 826% increase in 16 years.
Well, you got to think about that for a second. I mean, how you need all those cell phones to combat the epidemic of angry birds.
Of course. I mean, you don't want them out there. You gotta fight those pigs, right? But it's really true. I mean, it's just so much power. I mean, I think the numbers that we have kind of research was like 70 billion kilowatts, which is like insane. I mean, there's more power being used. I mean, if you look back 30, 40 years ago, that was an astounding amount of number. And unfortunately, we're just using more and more fossil fuels to power this, and less renewables or cleaner energy like nuclear power, hydroelectric, solar, wind, all these different more clean energies. And in some ways, I think that we're even having another problem that may come up. Just something that I see personally is the amount of EV vehicles that people want to buy, electric vehicles. They consume a huge amount of power.
You're redistributing demand of a resource from one to the other, but you're not really helping a situation because at the end of the day, we're in a closed environment and energy is going to have to be taken from someplace.
Right, exactly. We have to figure out how we're going to get more energy, in a small amount of denser form factor. I mean, gasoline has so much power in it. Or fossil fuels has so much power contained in it. So it's a pretty big challenge. So we know at one breath we can't 100% abandon fuel or fossil fuels, but at the same time we have to really see how much waste we're using. It's more than just shutting lights off. We use a lot of power in places that you don't realize using power. Like you use like all the social media apps, they're using tons of power in the background, using cloud, using tons of power in the background, especially when you consume services or systems that you don't utilize, which is very wasteful in some other way. But
and you said behind the curtain, like with the Wizard of Oz, but I do think, and especially before coming to Valiant, which this is a little embarrassing, but you really do, the device is in your hand and you're like, it's magically here. Like, this is how this works. And you don't realize that it's connected to all these other things that really do take so much energy.
Well, I not to bring it to the science fiction level, but Arthur C. Clarke had a quote about you can't really tell when you're far enough away removed from technology, things become magic. Quite honestly, unfortunately, if we're not very careful, we're going to start having a society that is like people who understand how these things work, and a society that doesn't understand. I think people really need that literacy, and then. And with that literacy, you'll get people's understanding, and maybe we'll have a better shot of conserving or finding solutions. But we'll get there in a second.
Exactly.
But I think another piece that's really important to remember is, and one more number, then I'm going to talk about some natural resources. But in 2018, which is 3 years ago, so this is not a super recent statistic. Bitcoin or cryptocurrency mining was using 66 terawatt hours, which is an
Mm-hmm.
unbelievable amount of power. I mean, literally like multiple cities worth of power, which is about it's less than 1% of the worldwide energy consumption. But think about the entire world.
Right. Yeah.
In one day's energy consumption, and you're using almost a third of a percent of it, which is a huge amount of power, just for one purpose that really doesn't necessarily benefit potentially a lot of people. That might only,
when you look at it, you have to question how much power is being used for the return. It's like a few years ago, I had built a perpetual grow of Boston butter lettuce, here in the house, where you set up a container and you've got 24 plants. Each row has 4 plants in it, and that way every week you're harvesting something new. And it seemed like efficient. It was cool. I'm not going to be spending money on salads. Yeah, but I also had to have a 450-watt light over them. You want to know what
every day
16, 17 hours a day, and you know what the power bill looked like?
Correct.
I mean, I paid like $300 for some lettuce. At that point, I might as well go to one of the places on the corner and get a salad.
Correct. And I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind. Like, it's not money from nothing. Everything has a cost. Everything has, and I think from a conservation ecology mindset, and that goes into like our next thing was natural resources. Right. I mean, it is a finite system, as of we know. We only have so much. I think it was a great quote, Matt. Sand is pretty much everywhere. So silicone, but you need gold or metals that allow conductivity. Gold or silver, aluminum.
Gold's really
gold, particularly for processors, particularly.
Yeah.
But gold is the one you definitely need. I mean, you can do other things, but gold is the current technology requires gold. And what was it? How much gold is in the earth theoretically?
The thing is, like, you see gold everywhere. Gold rings, earrings, necklaces, connectors for computers, audio equipment. But at the end of the day, if you took all the gold that's in the world, and this is an estimate, but it's one that's been used many times. Just imagine there being a solid brick of it in front of you that's 60 feet wide, 60 feet long, and 60 feet high.
A cube, a 60 feet.
A 60-foot cube of the material, and that would be everything that exists on this planet as far as gold is concerned.
You said that earlier. That is mind-blowing to me.
Right.
That is mind-blowing.
Like, if I close my eyes and I think about it, it's like, whoa, a 60 by 60 by 60 structure next to a human is huge, but that's because we do everything in the scope of who we are and ourselves. And once you get out of that and you kind of like take that step back and do like the 10,000-foot view, you're like, it literally is like a grain of sand in the middle of a desert.
Right.
And it's like, I mean, many of the materials we need have to be extracted from the ground, and those processes are also not efficient. Like, they take energy at the same time.
Right.
And leading to, because gold reminded me of like what we have to mine for, but the same.
Exactly.
I want gold. But the same, like, the process is not being efficient for the mining. The same can be said for the systems around environmental protection, right?
And the people. The people,
right? Yes, yeah, that's a huge,
there's the Mir mine in Siberia, and that's mostly it's mostly been stripped for the sake of, I think, mining diamonds, not things like gold or precious minerals for the sake of computing. But we're talking about things on a grander scale, so who cares? Check this thing out; it's scary. I mean, 525 meters straight down, and I think it's something like, I think it's actually the diameter is greater than the depth. So when you look at that, that's a scar on the planet at this point. That's the mosquito bite as a kid that you kept scratching.
Yes, that's a really good. That's an apt metaphor.
I mean, and the thing is, and once again, not that we do need to extract minerals and things from the earth at times. It is a vital thing that has to be done and to keep things moving, but it's a really dangerous and dirty work, and it's and I think to pause for a second to recognize what's happening when you do these things will make you kind of go, what I think is really important.
It's dangerous and dirty work that's not handled with the right equipment, with equipment that is not maintained properly due to the location in the countries a lot of these things are in.
Right.
And I mean, this mine that we show the photo of is in Siberia. It gets cold. That equipment needs to be protected. If it's not being protected, it's going to fail, and that's going to cost more money and use more fossil fuels to get stuff out of the ground. And if it is being taken care of, it's being taken care of by folks that are getting hurt every day. I mean, like, and I'll leave it at that because I don't want to turn the stream into something, outside the scope of what we're talking about, but it's bad.
Mining is dangerous work, and much like any kind of heavy industrial work, it's dangerous, and we should respect it for what it is. And I think it creates a lot of waste. I mean, in our industry, the amount of electronic waste created is staggering.
Let's just talk really quickly about the joke that is all over like social media, and I'm sure everyone sees it no matter what. It's like, if you're in your mid 30s, you should have this box, and it's like a photo of a box filled with like cables and old connectors and old.
Yeah.
And I the first time I saw that, I was like, haha, IT guy joke. And then it was like, no, that's pretty much everyone that.
No,
like, I had a friend who was
everyone.
Like, yeah. But the idea is that amount of waste is seen as a joke for the internet. It's not
right. Good. And another thing I think is that it's just look at some stats. I mean, a single device requires 3 times as weight in fossil fuel to develop and build it.
That's crazy.
Every gram of silicon wafer produced is 630 grams of fossil fuel used, and a PC takes 1.5 tons of water manufactured. And if you look at what's happening out west in the United States, here in New York and the Northeast, we've got more water than we know what to do with this past couple of weeks, in a really negative way. But out west, I mean, the forest fires, and the amount of the dry, there's a real potential disaster. I mean, there is a disaster happening out there right now because of lack of water, and to use it for, not to say we shouldn't use water for manufacturing, but same token, conserving it and reusing it, recycling equipment is really important. I think that's really, really critical. And if you think about, if you have 3.6 billion users or people using the internet, and they all have a device, probably most of them are using mobile devices at this point, or a combination. I know, like, to myself, I have a lot of devices in my house.
For every person, I was going to say the average is probably 3 to 6 or so, like of devices you interact with every day. And that is, I mean, I'm not very good at math, but I
that's a lot.
I can expertly say
that's our official unit of measure for the day. Everything's a lot.
If I'm hosting,
And when you think of it, like, think about the turnover you have with devices. Like, I know that personally, I'm a bit of a Luddite when it comes to personal technology. Like, I'm going to say it on the internet, I have never owned a DVD player.
Wow.
Like, I mean, I've had video game systems you can play DVDs in, but I've never like gone to like Best Buy or someplace and be like, hello, sir, I'd like a DVD player. Like, that's just never. There's a little 1920s vibe there. I was like, hey,
seriously, radio voice.
I need that HD. Like anyway, it's like Burgess Meredith going into Circuit City. It's just, I gotta stop. I'm going off the rails. But
yes.
I thank you for
You're painting a picture. You're painting a picture.
Yeah, but I mean, look, the devices, they tend to, something lasts for a few years. So you've got this turnover of this number of devices every few years for each person that's in possession of them. And what I was going to say was, I take a strange amount of pride in not getting a new cell phone. I think the one I had before the Motorola I have right now, I had for like 4.5 years before it finally got fried. And then our coworker Kevin has the one I have from before that I think I gave him in like 2015 or something like that. And the one I have right now, it's not going anywhere soon. And it's not because I don't want to spend the money or I don't want the neatest thing in the world. It's just, you got to question what you're really going to get from those items. If it's beneficial, is getting the newest iPhone something that you need because you need the device to be able to communicate and stay in touch with people, or is it just to be able to say you got the newest iPhone?
Exactly. There's got to be so much more awareness, I think, around our consumption of these products and how we dispose of these products. Like, we have some monitors that are dead in here that we just have to make sure we dispose of properly, and because you can't just throw them out. So we've really quickly, I just want to move on to the next segment, but we have discussed the scary stuff. We've looked at that mine. I've done crazy math in my head. Let's talk about the good stuff. Let's talk about some of the optimism and what we can do as small to medium sized businesses to mitigate some of this and help.
Absolutely. Just didn't want to interrupt, but we do have Jonathan coming in with some comments. So I want to make sure.
Oh, wonderful. Sorry.
It's almost like he hears me talk about these things earlier in the week, because the first thing we are going to talk about on the good side is how to do things like recycle.
Right.
Properly, right? I'm sorry, no, carbon related efforts is the first one, but it all works. So we're gonna get his comments in here really quickly, and then we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna address them as we go through our list of items. So
right, the carbon is really important. We don't realize how much carbon we produce when we buy automobiles, purchasing equipment, airline flights. There's a lot of places. It's just purchasing locally, carbon credit offsets, using public transportation, which is probably a huge one. I think that's I always think like find the things you can do that are not like, hey, I mean, obviously we still have to like exist or live, but at the same token, we should find responsible ways to do it. And I think those are the things we start there. The personal, like how you get to work. Also, I think work from home or hybrid workplace is great because it reduces the amount of people commuting. That's a great, I read some really interesting.
It reduces commuting, which is great from a carbon footprint side, but it also increases your power usage in individual homes as opposed to power being used for a larger group of people in an office.
Right.
So I bet you that, I mean, that just came to mind right now. That wasn't like a statistic or a note that I had, but I think that's sort of one of the things that needs to be evaluated. Where does the power get the most use? Where does it get its biggest bang for its buck?
Right.
And I think that also goes into the whole idea of carbon because, carbon is a byproduct and it's also the building blocks of life on this planet. So, you want to talk about double-edged swords. The stuff that we're made of is also going to kill us. And I think that's a large reason why the Paris Agreement, has committed to a net zero carbon situation by the middle of the century.
Right.
And I think we've all heard about, the carbon mitigation strategies and, different devices that have been built over the years and offsets and everything else. But I think that the one thing that I'd like to see people walk away with that are watching this today is to understand what the difference is between gross zero and net zero carbon, because they're very different things. And I think that one is completely attainable and the other one is a pipe dream. And I think it's so much a pipe dream that people don't even care about it anymore. I don't think that gross zero is something that anyone's going to spend any effort in because it doesn't make sense. I don't think it's possible to have a complete one-to-one removal of carbon from the environment. If you're creating X pounds of carbon annually, it doesn't mean you're going to be able to absorb or mitigate the same amount, but there are going to be other industries that may have much more efficient processes or putting out so much less that just being able to remove the average amount is going to help offset that difference. And that's what makes the concept of net zero carbon one that's very attractive.
Now, I see something here, a renewable energy credit. What is that? I guess.
Renewable energy is measured in it's a unit of measure.
Not megawatt hours.
Yes, thank you. I couldn't remember. Here's the problem. We're talking kilowatt hours. We're talking terawatt hours. I'm doing the Back to the Future theme thing next week, so I'm thinking about
gigawatts.
Yeah, just 1.21. That's throwing off my math. I'm going over from imperial to metric, and it's a mess. But it's 1 megawatt of carbon emissions, or the amount of carbon that would be emitted from the generation of 1 megawatt of power. And you do have the ability to purchase offsets to help with the problem. So it means if you're not actively mitigating carbon or trapping it in the air, because I don't think too many of us can actually do that, you do have the ability to work with organizations that will do it for you or on your behalf if you pay. It's the idea. It's similar to like buying trees, to help with oxygen production.
I did not know about this.
There is an organization, Cloverly, and I'm going to put the link up to their. They have a great kind of like interactive map that'll show you different organizations throughout the entire world, not just the country, throughout the entire world that offer both carbon offsets and renewable energy credits.
That's awesome.
It's great. And it's one of those things like, look, we're technologists. We talk about infrastructure, as we say, that's our bread and butter. So I don't want us to come in and start talking about all these different options, but you know what? We're going to put some options in front of you for you to go research on your own. And Cloverly is definitely an excellent place to get started.
That's great. So just moving on from that a little bit, and kind of touching back to what we ended the last segment with, recycling technology. How do we do that safely? What are ways to do that? Because I think that can be a confusing problem for a lot of people. One of the considerations that we discussed last week while talking about healthy computing environments was storage of equipment that is no longer in use. And well, just saying. So what do we do with that stuff? What do we do with the extra technology when it's obsolete?
So I think the first one is, I know myself, people have mountains of batteries in their house.
Yes.
Any kind of person had tools, and you should never throw a battery in the garbage. There's a lot of recyclable material in a battery.
It's the sheer amount of energy that a battery can contain, even if it is not charged, is something. In fact, if anyone wants to see what happens, just go onto YouTube and search for 18650R explosion, and you'll see what an 18650R battery looks like when it discharges, because it becomes a little missile.
Right.
And we're talking about something that's a little bit larger than like a AA battery. We're not talking about, the series of 15 or 16 of them that'll be found in a laptop battery. Because in a lot of cases, they're just that circuit created with multiple batteries of that same type.
Correct. And I think, honestly, an electric vehicle is probably about a couple of thousand of those batteries in series. So that's why, there's a whole process. But it's really important that, that batteries and any of this electronic equipment doesn't go into a landfill. Because it has a lot of toxic material in it. It should be appropriately recycled. Many communities will have a recycling day in your community where you can bring it to recycling bin. There's a bunch of companies and or nonprofits that do this kind of work. When we work with sometimes that value here is called Protect Technology Recycling. They take everything. You basically they do charge for what you're taking based on what it is. But that means it's going to be ethically recycled. It's going to be, properly disposed of if it isn't disposed of, and probably brought to a proper dismantler to take out the rare earth minerals and or metals that are value.
It's also good to mention that there are a lot of buildings, at least in Manhattan, in the city, that offer their own services around recycling.
Right.
And it's worth just checking with building management to see what your options are.
Sure.
And no matter what you do, you ask the question how it's taken care of, because if you start disposing of machines in a way that's just kind of like, along with like the stuff from the kitchen garbage at the end of the day, I've found that buildings don't give you a warning. They just fine you.
Save
a few bucks. Ask the question.
Also, I mean, I'll put my cybersecurity hat on for a second. You do want to know that if their hard drives and or storage media is being properly either destroyed physically, wiped, if you're getting a certificate of destruction. If you don't know, you're not sure, wipe it yourself. There's some great tools out there. Matt and I will throw some stuff up into the stream notes afterwards on YouTube of how you can wipe out a machine 100%, because you just don't want it. It can very easily become something that people are taking and they will use to build especially corporate.
I'll admit that as a 15 or 16-year-old, I had gone dumpster diving a couple times looking for gear, and you do find stuff that maybe you shouldn't see.
Correct.
And if from my point of view, it's something I need to see. From someone else's point of view, it was the general ledger of their company. So
correct.
You got to take it really seriously.
Exactly. Yep. Sorry.
No, you're fine. Just moving things along. Besides, so this responsibly recycling this stuff, finding companies that would need it. You can also go the charitable route, and that can end up as a tax write-off. So that's a good incentive.
The National Christina Foundation is one that I did a lot of work with about 20 years ago. Got a donation of probably around 80 computers from a company called Eurobrokers, and managed to work with the Christina Foundation to get them over to a school in Brooklyn, the Automotive High School. And it turned out that it ended up being like 3, computer labs worth of equipment.
That's so great,
and machines for kids to not just operate, but take apart, learn, understand how they work. And it was perfect. That could have been recycled. It could have gone into a landfill, but instead it went into classrooms that helped spark kids, interest in technology,
build skills that they can use later.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that as an option. And George, you mentioned this before, but again, the one place you should really try to not let your technology end up is a landfill.
Landfill. And I kind of answered Jonathan's question before about what to do with all this stuff. I say the first thing you should do is, if you're in your home and your own personal equipment, is look for that local recycling day in your community. If you don't have that, reach out to your MSP or your IT provider. Generally speaking, we'll have resources that we can work with to help you alleviate that. And that may be one of those great things you can do in your own company as like a kind of like Earth Day kind of event where, hey, bring your old stuff into the office. Or we're gonna have a disposal day. Was really powerful. I know here at Valiant we tend to accumulate stuff in ways that are terrifying, because every time I come to the office, like, where did that come from?
It's hey, IT guys out there, the idea of assembling the Game of Thrones seat, or I guess throne, out of PC cases is not an achievement. It's a mark of shame.
Also, it's not nearly as a novel idea as you think it is.
No, boy.
You're not the first nor the last. They'll make a skull throne.
Any artwork inspired by Game of Thrones, that's great. But also,
and also, if any other IT service provider wants the challenge, we challenge you to do the same thing, but out of ramen noodle bricks, which we've also done. Much better.
Yes.
All right, so guys, I'm going to try to land this plane a little bit because we are up on the half hour. But really quick, I want to run through sort of, now we went through the small business, what we can do, recycling, everything like that. Also, let's go to the individual. What consumer habits or best practices, which is a phrase we really like here, what are those things that we can do just on a day-to-day basis?
Absolutely. I think first off is, before running out and buying a new piece of equipment, if something breaks, look at getting it repaired. I did it to myself this week. I fell and broke my phone, which was it was actually very exciting. Wet rocks, is hiking and down on the ground. And the phone took the hit. Better than I figured. It was better the phone than myself.
Yes.
But you always have that moment like, oh, should I run out and buy a new phone? Do I need a new phone? And it's like, well, I had a backup phone and I can get this one repaired for a much less cost. And in the end of the day, a lot of technology has a lot of life left in it in ways that you may not realize. Recycle, reuse, reinvent it, like how it's used. I mean, Matt and I were talking about making a remote control out of an old tablet. That's great.
Yeah, you get the old, Amazon Fire tablet, and I mean, hopefully some from Amazon's listening, because they only are effective for about a year before they slow down to the point where they're useless. And when they get to that point, instead of replacing it, you do something else with it. So in my house, we've got, Echo devices around the place, and we have one tablet that's used to control environment in the house, lighting, temperature, everything. And it's nice. It's almost like the equivalent of, like, you remember when MTV Cribs came out and Ozzy Osbourne had the gigantic, the big remote that cost like thousands of dollars. It's the same thing, except it cost $89 on a thing that would have probably been recycled had we not thought of doing that.
Correct.
So you give something a new life, you give it a new sense of purpose, and you also kind of, give your wallet a break as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think, as far as do your research about environmentally friendly products and electronics. Look for items with the Energy Star logo or ones certified by Electronic Product Environmental Asset Tool. These are things I didn't know, and I think it's really helpful, because I think a lot of this stuff is just about educating yourself just enough to make the right choice. Right. And so, guys, we are hitting the wall of our stream, but I'm just going to close that off with saying, Matt, you said this before, but we live in a closed environment, and we need to do what we can to minimize our impact on it. So treat the world like you would your home. Maybe not my home. I'm working on doing the dishes more, but it's the only one you've got.
Actually, a dishwasher uses less energy, but we can do a whole consumer one. There's some great podcasts out there about utilization of power in your home and everything. But one other thing, if you're not using it, turn it off. Raise the temperature in your air conditioners. Lower the heat, so you're using less fuel. But put it. You always laugh at your mom saying, "Put the sweater on."
What you need to do is quantify your habits to your expenses, and then all of a sudden turning the lights off when you walk out of a room becomes less of a pain in the butt.
When I was a kid, I remember my dad, I would leave lights on all over the house, and my dad would just go, "What, you work for the electric company?" And then he made me go back and turn them off, on like a tour of shame. So everyone, guys, thank you so much. I loved this stream, and I also think it's such an important thing to talk about, because whether you like it or not, these concerns are super real, and we have to figure out other ways of operating that are going to help our planet as much as we can. Really quick preview of next week's stream. Back to the office, question mark. Back to the office. There, I delivered it well.
Yeah, that's better.
And Matt, you've got some really fun design around this. It's sort of a Back to the Future theme that I was really excited
you
to
also
see.
said back to the office, so it might go the Dunder Mifflin route. I might make sure that I might challenge us to all. I might challenge us to all talk like Kevin and use as few words as possible.
I would love that. I think that's something that a lot of us should. I should practice.
Right.
Just for the subject of next week's stream, I'm holding my knitting needle. There's a lot going on right now around COVID and returning to the workplace. Some companies are encouraging it. I know some of our clients are. Others are providing some flexibility with remote work, and there's a whole like great resignation thing going on, because now I think employees feel like they have more options because so many more companies can allow for remote work versus in-office work. So we're going to talk about some actions we've taken to continue providing services to customers while ensuring safety, cybersecurity, productivity of our team, as well as some of what we see going on with the small businesses that we work with, and just patterns we're seeing there. Because as these last 2 years, it's been a lot of new choices for a lot of small businesses to make, and we're here to help guide you through that.
Well, and we're making them just as much as everyone else, and I think that's really a part of next week. Isn't going to be sitting here talking about what everyone else is doing, but how do we feel about what's being done? How do we feel about how things are being handled internally? Because I think that we did really well with the transition, and I think it's worth. I would agree with that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I think us reflecting on our experience and trying to gift that to other people is super important. So if you enjoyed today's stream, hit the thumbs up button, please. Subscribe. If you have questions for us, please post it on our YouTube. We really love, again, to answer those things. And please visit us at thevaliantway.com and learn more about us and our services. And thank you so much for joining us, Matt, George. Thank you so much. Fascinating topic. And I always love hearing what you guys have to say about all this stuff. So
thanks, Megan. Thanks, Matt. Great week. Thanks a lot.
You guys have a good one. I'll talk to you later.
All right. Bye now.